And welcome back, folks. May not feel like it's staying cooped up inside thanks to the China virus, but there are just 91 days until the election. Meanwhile, the basket of biased press is just beginning to catch up on the dangers of mail-in voting. We showed you on Friday articles from CBS, The Atlantic, and The Washington Post, all highlighting the dangers of mail-in voting. And now today, the New York Times running this headline: why the botched New York City primary has become the November nightmare. For more on this, joined by two people who have been highlighting the dangers of mail-in balloting for a lot longer than just the past few days. Joined by Liz Harrington, spokeswoman for the RNC, and Christy McLaughlin. She's a Republican running for Florida's 19th Congressional District. Ladies, welcome aboard. Liz, we're going to start with you. Last week, the president tweeted about delaying the election. At the time, we thought this was a tactic to get the biased press to actually focus in on the dangers of mail-in voting, and it looks like the tweet may have accomplished the goal here.
Well, President Trump gets results, as he's akin to do. And it's amazing because that tweet from the New York Times and this article that came out today, it's written as if, I wonder if anyone was sounding these alarm bells like we have been, and President Trump has been for months now, because they keep repeating the same Democrat talking point that there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud, as if they're pronouncing something that hasn't even happened yet, because actually we've never vastly expanded automatic mail-in balloting before. We've never done it on this scale, and we were simply pointing out maybe government isn't equipped to do it in overnight and completely overhaul our elections, and certainly not equipped when Democrats are trying to ram through their liberal election law changes like ballot harvesting and sending out ballots to inactive voters and letting them be counted after Election Day. It makes a joke of our elections, and we're seeing the disaster play out in all of these Democrat-run cities that have adopted these radical plans.
Yeah, no kidding. Christy, I got to ask you about your thoughts on mail-in voting, because I think universal mail-in voting and absentee, they're often confused because there are a lot of lazy so-called journalists out there who don't explain the difference, number one. Number two, and I've been saying this, and I want to see what you think. Anyone elected in a universal mail-in balloting system, I don't think anybody's under any obligation to follow or listen to what they say, because you can't trust the election process. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. The biggest issue, and just as Liz was mentioning, we have harvesting ballots. We have an issue of, mail-in ballots go missing. We have, just look at what happened in 2018 in Broward County, how we had a huge issue in Florida when it came to votes being counted correctly. And that wasn't even a mail-in ballot issue. We have not had mail-in ballots to this extent ever. This would be an unprecedented issue. So I 100% support President Trump's proposal, as long as we have the inauguration or the the correct date for returning to office in January. Then we need to ensure that we have a proper election, and we have ensured that all of the ballots are counted and that our votes matter.
Liz, I just got through talking with Bernie Carrick about a story that came out of Minneapolis where that liberal city that's defunded their police, as you know, the police are now sending out notices to the people saying, hey, if a criminal approaches you, just go ahead and give him your wallet. Do not resist, and make sure you're carrying cash so you can pay off the criminals for us. Let me ask you, because of the way the polls are going right now, that looks an awful lot like 2016. Remember what happened when Donald Trump won the first time? What did the Democrats do? They went out there and they burned our cities like they're doing right now. They vandalized, and what do you expect will happen if President Trump pulls out another win, despite what the biased press has been trying to put out there as a marker for this election?
Well, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. The mainstream media is missing the big story once again. And, President Trump said 4 years ago, what do you have to lose? And he proved, actually, you have a lot to gain. We saw the best economic numbers. We've seen the lowest unemployment numbers, the highest wage growth across the board, every demographic. And what do you have to lose in these Democrat radical-run cities? Everything. And long after the news cameras left, you have Minneapolis that is now suffering, where their storefronts are burnt out. You had a pawn shop where looters and rioters burned it to the ground, and then they found a dead body in it a month later. Homicides doubling. And of course, the radical left-wing fringe members of the city council that are all members of the same party that Ilhan Omar is, yet but three that I think are the Green Party, they vote to abolish the police. They hire up private security. And what about the rest of the city? What about the people that can't afford to flee and leave it? So they do have everything to lose when cities adopt these radical Democrat platforms. Well, President Trump is the president of all Americans. He stepped in to restore order in that city, and we're going to do everything we can with Operation Legend and other initiatives to bring law and order and equal justice under the law to these cities and all across America.
Yeah.
And that's what President Trump's going to do in a second term.
I just can't shake this feeling the Democrat Socialist Party is sending a message to America. Hey, if you want all this violence to stop, we can make it stop. Just vote for us. And it feels over and over and over again like we're being blackmailed by the Democrat Party. Christy, speaking of intolerance of the left, I'm told you were in law school. You got kicked out of your law school because you dared to wear a Trump hat. Is that true?
It was not so much a Trump hat, but the fact that I was actively involved in the Republican Party to get Republicans elected and President Trump elected. It's to your point that these radical leftists, these radical Marxist socialists, strong arm us into a corner to force especially young people to turn to the left. Otherwise, they will make it impossible to, function as a normal member of society. What happened in my law school was they created such a hostile environment in my school that I couldn't even graduate.
Good grief. Well, folks, I just hope you're listening to her story. That is the example of the tolerant and loving left. They're tolerant as long as you agree with them. Liz, Christy, I appreciate the time, guys. Appreciate it. Coming up, the call to recall California Governor Gavin Newsom is picking up steam. It's next on the Chris Salcedo Show here on Newsmax TV.